The night air carried a soft chill across the open fields, the kind that made everything feel quiet and still. The wind slid gently over the long grass, whispering through the trees. The stars hung bright in the dark sky, scattered like tiny sparks above the wide land. Emma sat alone on the wooden fence near the barn. The fence had been there for decades, its edges smooth from years of hands and boots resting on it. She leaned forward slightly, her elbows on her knees, her hands loosely folded together. Her hair fell softly over her shoulders, moving a little with the wind. She had come back to this place after many years, though it did not feel the same anymore. Once this land had been her whole world. She grew up here, riding horses in the early morning, running across the fields barefoot, listening to her father's deep laugh echoing through the hills. But tonight it felt different. The silence of the ranch was heavy, and every creak of the old wood made her chest feel tighter. She looked out toward the line of the trees, but she wasn't really seeing anything. Her thoughts were too loud for her to notice the world around her. Her boots were covered in dust from the long walk she had taken earlier. She had walked the old trail behind the barn, the same one she used to run down as a little girl, but now the steps felt slower. Tired. She had left this town years ago, running toward the city, thinking it would give her everything she had ever dreamed of. But dreams sometimes turn into long nights and heavy hearts. The city took more than it gave, and when everything finally fell apart, she had nowhere left to go except the ranch. The night grew colder, and she wrapped her arms around herself. The sound of horses moving inside the barn broke the silence. A soft snort, a gentle step. It was the same sound she remembered falling asleep to when she was young. She breathed in slowly, letting the cold air fill her lungs. She felt it deep inside her chest. Something about being back here felt like pressing on a bruise, familiar but painful. Then she heard footsteps behind her, slow, steady, and familiar. Cole. She didn't have to turn to know it was him. She remembered the way he walked. He had always walked with a kind of quiet strength. He was a cowboy through and through, with calloused hands, worn-out boots, and a calmness that didn't need many words. They had known each other since they were kids. He stayed when she left. He never asked why. He just lived the way he always had, steady like the land. Cole stopped a few steps away from her. He didn't speak at first. He just stood there, his hat pulled low, his hands resting on his belt. The night didn't need words yet. The two of them stood in the same silence that had grown up with them. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was old, like the fence, like the barn, like everything around them. After a moment, Cole walked forward and leaned on the fence beside her. His shoulder brushed lightly against hers. He didn't ask what was wrong. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. He knew she wouldn't have come back if everything had been fine. He could see it in the way her shoulders curved inward, like she was trying to hold herself together. She glanced at him but didn't speak. He kept his eyes on the horizon the way he always did. Cole had never been the kind of man to fill silence with noise. He understood that sometimes silence held the truth better than any words could. Emma lowered her head. Her hands clenched and unclenched against the rough wood of the fence. A few strands of hair fell across her face. She thought she had become good at hiding her pain in the city. She smiled when people expected it. She worked hard and kept moving forward, but back here under the quiet stars and the open sky, it was harder to hide anything. The land saw everything. It always had. Cole shifted slightly, just enough to let her know he was still there, solid and real. She felt the warmth of him beside her, and something in her chest ached. She remembered the summer nights when they were younger, when everything seemed simple. They used to sit here after long days of riding horses, laughing about nothing at all. She remembered the smell of fresh hay, the sound of his easy laugh, the way she used to feel safe in this place. She hadn't felt safe in a long time. Her eyes began to sting, but she forced herself to blink them clear. She didn't want to cry. Not here, not in front of him, not after all these years. But the pain sat too close to the surface, pressing against her like a wave she couldn't hold back forever. Cole looked at her for the first time. His eyes were steady, warm, and quiet. He didn't need to ask her what had happened. He had seen that look before in other people, in himself, in quiet nights after loss. He recognized the kind of pain that didn't need fixing. It just needed someone not to look away. Emma exhaled slowly. Her breath came out shaky. Her fingers dug into the wood. "I didn't think I'd ever come back," she whispered, almost like she wasn't talking to him at all but to the night. Cole didn't move. He let the words hang there, He had always believed that people say what they need to when they're ready. Not before. She looked down at the dirt near her boots. The moonlight caught her hair and painted it silver. The barn light behind them flickered softly, throwing warm shadows across the ground. She thought about everything that had happened. The city lights that had once felt exciting now felt far away. The noise, the speed, the cold faces. She had given so much of herself out there. She had loved, trusted, and watched everything slip through her fingers. She came back because she didn't know where else to go. Cole shifted closer. The wood under them creaked softly. He didn't touch her. He didn't try to make her talk more. But she felt the space between them grow smaller. His quiet presence wrapped around her like the old porch light, soft, steady, and safe. She lifted her head and looked toward the open field again. The stars above the ranch were clearer than she remembered. Out there in the city, everything was always loud, bright, fast. Here, time slowed down. Here, the pain didn't disappear, but it didn't drown her either. It breathed with her. Her heart hurt, but it was the kind of hurt that came when you started to let go of something heavy. Cole glanced at her again, his jaw tightening slightly. He had seen storms pass over this land. He had seen fences break and be rebuilt. He had learned that broken things didn't mean the end. They just meant the start of something slower, quieter, more real. And as he stood beside her, he understood that Emma wasn't just back for the ranch. She was back to find the pieces of herself she had lost out there. The horses moved again inside the barn. One of them gave a soft nicker, as if sensing the weight of the night. Cole smiled a little, the corner of his mouth lifting just enough for her to notice. It wasn't a loud smile. It was a gentle one, the kind that said everything was going to hold together even if slowly. Emma's shoulders dropped a little, and for the first time since she had returned, she didn't feel like running. She just breathed. She let the night air fill her lungs. She let the silence settle around them. She let Cole's quiet steadiness sit beside her without pushing it away. The night stretched long across the land, wrapping the two of them in the calm of the ranch. She didn't know what would come next. She didn't know if anything would ever feel the way it once did. But for that moment, sitting on the fence under the stars with Cole standing beside her, she didn't feel completely lost anymore. The world didn't need to be fixed tonight. It just needed to be felt. The next morning came slow and soft over the wide land. The sun rose quietly behind the hills, washing the sky in gentle gold. The ranch woke up to the sounds of life, the creak of the barn door, the soft nicker of horses, the whistle of the wind slipping through the grass. Emma stood by the kitchen window, holding a cup of coffee in both hands. The warmth of it touched her fingers, but her mind still felt cold. She hadn't slept much. The past had followed her into the night, whispering through her dreams like voices from a life she couldn't escape. The old wooden house creaked as she moved. Every step echoed with memories. The picture frames on the wall still held photos from years ago. Her parents, the horses, and one photo of her as a child sitting on her father's shoulders. She looked at that picture for a long time. Her father's smile was wide, full of pride. He had loved this land more than anything. He used to tell her, "This place breathes, Emma. If you take care of it, it'll take care of you." She hadn't understood what that meant back then. Now, standing alone in the quiet house, she thought maybe she did. Outside, Cole was already working. He was always the first one out, even when there was frost on the ground. Emma watched him from the window. He moved with the same easy rhythm he always had, tossing hay into the feeding troughs, checking the fence line, talking softly to the horses as if they were old friends. There was something comforting in the way he moved, steady, patient, unhurried. The world could fall apart, and Cole would still show up at sunrise and do what needed to be done. She stepped outside, pulling her jacket close. The air smelled like hay and morning dew. Cole glanced up as she approached, his hat low against the sun. "Morning," he said simply. "Morning," she replied. Her voice was quiet but clear. For a moment they just stood there watching the horses. One of them, a chestnut mare named Willow, walked up to the fence and nudged Emma's hand. She smiled and ran her fingers along the horse's neck. "She remembers me," Emma said softly. "Of course she does," Cole answered. "She doesn't forget the people who treat her kind." Emma nodded, her eyes following the horse as it turned away. "I missed this," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I missed everything about this place." Cole didn't say anything. He just looked at her, his eyes calm and kind. Then he said quietly, "Sometimes missing something means it's still part of you. You just had to come back to remember." She looked at him then. For a brief moment their eyes met, and something warm flickered between them, something simple and human. She broke the gaze first, looking down at her boots. "I thought leaving would fix everything," she said. "I thought if I got far enough away, the pain would stay behind." Cole leaned on the fence. "Pain's not like that," he said. "You can ride as far as you want, but it'll ride with you until you face it." Emma sighed. "I tried to face it. I tried to move on, but everything just fell apart." She shook her head slowly. "The city took more than I had to give. It takes your time, your peace, your kindness. I thought I was strong enough to keep up, but I wasn't." Cole listened without interrupting. He didn't look away. He let her words fill the air and settle. That was one thing about him, he never rushed anyone. He knew when silence was part of healing. "I lost my job," she continued quietly. "Then I lost someone I cared about. And after that I just kept losing pieces of myself until there wasn't much left." She looked up toward the hills. "Coming back here wasn't part of any plan. I just needed to breathe." Cole nodded. "You picked a good place for that," he said. "The land's got a way of letting people breathe again. You just have to let it." They stood side by side, watching the horses eat. The sound of their steady chewing filled the air. The ranch wasn't fancy or new, but it was alive. Every fence post, every dusty path, every broken tool had a story. And maybe, Emma thought, she could still be part of that story. Cole finally spoke again, breaking the silence. "You can help me fix the south fence later if you're up for it," he said. "Could use an extra pair of hands." Emma looked at him with a faint smile. "You think I remember how to do that?" He smiled back, the first real smile she had seen from him in years. "I think you'll figure it out." The day passed slowly, filled with small things that mattered more than they seemed. Emma followed Cole out to the south field. The fence stretched long and uneven, leaning where the wood had rotted. She rolled up her sleeves and helped hold the posts while Cole hammered new ones in. The rhythm of the work was simple. Steady thuds, the creak of old nails, the scent of sun-warmed pine. Sweat gathered at her hairline, and for the first time in months she didn't feel weighed down by her thoughts. They didn't talk much while they worked. Every now and then Cole would glance over to check she was doing all right, and she'd nod. The silence between them was peaceful. It wasn't empty. It was shared. At midday they sat under a big oak tree to rest. Cole handed her a bottle of water, and she took it with a small thank you. The air was warm, and the sound of crickets filled the space between them. "Feels strange," Emma said after a while. "Working like this again. Being out here. It's quiet, but not the kind of quiet that hurts." Cole nodded. "That's what I like about this life," he said. "It's honest. You work hard, you see what you've done at the end of the day. The land doesn't judge you. It just needs care." She leaned back against the tree, looking up at the branches. "I used to think I'd never come back," she said softly. "But now that I'm here, it feels like I never really left." Cole looked at her for a moment, his eyes thoughtful. "That's because part of you never did," he said. The words stayed with her. Even after they went back to work, even after the sun began to drop toward the horizon, those words echoed inside her. Part of you never did. Maybe he was right. Maybe she had tried to bury too much of herself under city lights and crowded streets. Maybe she had forgotten who she was before the world told her what she should be. When the sun began to sink, the land turned gold. They stood by the finished fence, both tired but quietly proud. Emma brushed her hands together and smiled faintly. "It's not perfect," she said. Cole looked at the straight line of new posts and smiled back. "Neither are we," he said. "But it'll hold." They walked back to the barn together. The air smelled of earth and hay. The horses lifted their heads as they passed, their dark eyes following them. Cole stopped by the barn door and looked at her. "You did good today," he said. Emma laughed lightly. "I'm not sure my arms agree with you," he chuckled. "You'll get used to it. Hard work's good for the heart." They stood there a moment longer, the evening light stretching across their faces. Emma looked out at the fields, the land glowing with the soft color of sunset. She felt tired, but it was a clean kind of tired, the kind that comes from doing something real. As the sky turned deeper orange, Cole tipped his hat slightly. "You gonna stay for supper?" he asked. Emma hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." They walked toward the house, the air cooling around them. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, and the sound drifted across the open plains. Emma felt something stir inside her, a small, quiet strength she thought she had lost. The ranch wasn't just a place anymore. It was a part of her soul waking back up. Inside the house, the smell of old wood and warmth greeted them. Cole started a small fire in the stove while Emma set the table. Neither said much, but the silence was different now. It was soft, safe. The kind of silence that feels like home. When they finally sat down to eat, Emma caught herself smiling again, not because everything was fixed, but because she felt human again. The pain hadn't gone, but it had changed shape. It no longer pressed down. It breathed beside her. And when she looked across the table at Cole, the quiet cowboy who never tried to save her but simply stayed near, she realized something important. Sometimes healing doesn't come in loud moments. It comes in quiet days, small acts, and steady company. And that night, as the firelight flickered on the old walls, she felt something deep inside her start to heal. The night came down over the ranch with a soft weight. The stars spread wide and clear, brighter than anything Emma had seen in the city. The air smelled like hay and cool earth. The wind moved gently through the trees, carrying the quiet sound of crickets and horses shifting in the barn. Emma sat alone on the old porch steps, a worn blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The wooden steps creaked softly beneath her, the way they always had when she was young. Her hands were still rough from the fence work they had done during the day. She traced her thumb across the thin cuts on her palms. They didn't hurt much, but they reminded her of something real, something she could touch. For so long in the city, everything had felt distant and cold, like she was reaching out into empty air. But here, the land had a way of making everything honest. It didn't hide things. The house behind her was quiet. Cole had gone to check on the horses one last time before turning in. He was like that, always making sure everything and everyone was all right before the night ended. Emma stared out into the darkness of the fields. The moonlight spread across the grass, making it shine like silver. She should have felt peaceful, but the quiet was starting to stir up everything she had tried to bury. For weeks before she came back, she had kept moving through her life like a shadow. She had told herself she didn't need anyone, that she was fine on her own. But here, under the open sky, it became harder to lie to herself. The silence didn't let her hide. It pulled her pain up from where she had pushed it down. She pulled the blanket tighter around her. The air touched her cheeks, cold and soft. Her chest felt tight, as if the weight she had carried for years was pressing against her ribs. She had kept it locked up, hidden behind polite smiles and quick answers. But here, away from all the noise, there was nothing to cover it with anymore. She heard the slow sound of boots on wood behind her. Cole stepped onto the porch, his hat in his hand, his shirt sleeves rolled up. His face caught the faint glow of the porch light. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at her, then sat down next to her on the steps. The wood creaked under his weight. They stared out into the dark field together. Neither of them spoke for a long time. It wasn't the kind of silence that pushed people apart. It was the kind that made breathing easier. Cole didn't ask her how she was feeling. He didn't try to fill the space with soft words. He just sat there warm and quiet beside her. Finally, Emma exhaled slowly. "I keep trying to pretend like I'm okay," she whispered, her voice low and rough. "But I'm not." Cole tilted his head slightly, listening. She looked down at her hands. Her nails were chipped. Dirt still caught at the edges from the work earlier. She liked it that way. It felt honest. "I thought I could carry everything," she said softly. "I thought if I just stayed busy, kept smiling, and acted strong, I'd be fine. But it's like no matter how hard I run, it's still there." Cole didn't look away. His voice came out steady and calm. "Running only works for a while," he said. "Then it catches up." Emma laughed lightly, but there was no joy in it. It already has. She had spent so many nights in the city pretending not to feel anything. She went to work, smiled at strangers, came home to an empty apartment, and told herself she didn't care. But the pain had waited for her, quiet and patient. It had followed her here. She took a deep breath. "I lost someone," she said slowly. "Someone I trusted. Someone I thought would never hurt me." Her voice shook slightly, but she didn't stop. "And when everything broke, I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't trust anyone after that. Not even myself." The night wind brushed against her face, and for a moment she thought she might stop breathing. She had not said those words out loud since it happened. The memories came back sharp, like a knife pressed against her heart. Cole didn't try to touch her or say it would be okay. He just sat there, steady like the fence posts they had fixed together. That was who he was. He didn't fix pain with words. He gave it space to exist. Emma closed her eyes. I keep hearing my own voice, the way I begged them not to go, the way I held on when I should have let go. It's like it's stuck in me. It's not even the person I miss. It's the version of me I lost back then. I was strong. I was sure. And now I feel like a shell of who I used to be. Cole's eyes were steady on her face. You're still here, he said quietly. She opened her eyes. It doesn't feel like it. He looked out toward the dark hills. Sometimes being here doesn't feel big. Sometimes it's just breathing when you don't want to. Waking up when it feels pointless. Standing when you'd rather fall. That's still here. His voice was soft, but it hit deep. She stared at him, her throat tightening. The wind picked up slightly, brushing strands of hair across her face. Her hands trembled just a little. She whispered, "It hurts too much." Those words hung in the air, sharp and raw. Cole slowly turned toward her. His rough hand lifted with quiet care. He didn't grab her, didn't pull her in. He just reached out and gently touched the side of her face. His palm was warm against her cold skin. It wasn't the kind of touch meant to take pain away. It was the kind that said, I see it. I'm here anyway. Emma didn't move. Her breath caught in her chest. The feeling of someone holding her face, not to fix her, not to judge her, just to be present, was almost too much. She felt the tears before she realized they were falling. Her body shook with quiet sobs. For so long she had locked this pain behind walls. But those walls had cracks now. She didn't hide her face. She didn't turn away. She let the tears fall hot against the cool air. Cole's thumb brushed lightly along her cheek. He didn't speak, but his eyes said everything. You're still here. You matter. You're allowed to feel this. The night around them stayed still. The horses in the barn were quiet. The stars burned softly above. Emma leaned forward slowly, resting her forehead against his chest. He didn't pull her closer or push her away. He simply stayed where he was, steady and real. She could hear his heartbeat against her ear, slow and calm. Her tears soaked through his shirt, but he didn't seem to mind. His hand stayed on the side of her face, gentle, grounding her like the earth beneath their feet. It's not weakness, Cole finally said quietly. It hurts because it mattered. That's how you know you're still here. Emma held her breath at his words. The world seemed to slow down around them. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was holding everything alone. She didn't feel like she was carrying her pain through the dark by herself. She let the sobs fade into quiet breaths. The weight inside her chest didn't disappear, but it felt different now. It wasn't just hers anymore. It had been shared even for just this moment. When she finally leaned back, her eyes were red and wet, but she didn't look away in shame. Cole met her gaze, steady as always. He didn't pity her. He just saw her. All of her. She wiped her cheeks with the back of her hand and gave a shaky laugh. I didn't mean to fall apart like that. You didn't fall apart, he said gently. You just let some of it out. There's a difference. She nodded slowly, the tightness in her chest loosening just a little. She looked out at the open field again, and for the first time the darkness didn't scare her. It felt wide but not empty. The wind settled. The night wrapped around them like an old friend. She leaned against his shoulder and he let her. They didn't talk anymore. They didn't have to. The pain wasn't gone, but it had been seen. And sometimes that was enough to keep breathing. As the night stretched on, Emma closed her eyes, listening to the quiet. The world felt softer than it had in a long time. She wasn't fixed, but she wasn't alone. And in that silence, something inside her began to heal. Not fast, not loud, but real. The sun rose slowly over the hills, painting the ranch in soft gold. The early air felt cool on the skin, filled with the smell of hay, dust, and the quiet life of the land. Emma stood near the porch, watching the sky change its colors. A soft breeze touched her face as if the earth itself was breathing. She felt tired from the night before, but the tiredness was different. It wasn't heavy like before. It was quiet and honest, like something inside her had cracked open just enough for light to come through. She walked toward the barn where Cole was already at work. He always started before sunrise, moving with steady steps and quiet focus. His voice was low as he talked to the horses the way he always did, gentle and sure. Emma leaned against the barn door and watched him. The light from outside fell over his shoulders, outlining his figure in warm gold. Cole looked up and gave her a small nod. "Morning," he said in that calm way of his. "Morning," she replied softly. She stepped closer. The horses lifted their heads, recognizing her. One of them, the same chestnut mare, came forward and brushed its nose against her shoulder. She laughed quietly, rubbing the horse's neck. It was a soft sound, but it was real. Cole noticed it. "Haven't heard that in a long time," he said. Emma tilted her head. "Heard what?" "A real laugh," he said simply. She looked down at her hands, feeling her cheeks warm a little. She didn't know how to answer that. For months in the city, she had forced herself to smile, but she had forgotten what it felt like to laugh without thinking about it. They worked together that morning. Cole handed her tools, and she followed his lead. They fixed a few loose boards on the barn wall, brushed the horses, and carried water from the well. It was the kind of work that didn't need fancy words or big plans. It was slow, steady, and grounding. As the morning passed, Emma found herself moving with more ease. Her hands hurt, but it was a good hurt. It reminded her that she was part of something real. She wasn't standing in the noise of the city anymore, pretending to be fine. She was here, breathing, working, living. When the work was done, Cole sat on an old wooden bench outside the barn, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. Emma sat beside him, the sun warm on their shoulders. For a while they didn't speak. The sound of birds and the wind through the fields filled the silence. Finally, Cole spoke. "You know," he said slowly, "pain doesn't stay the same forever. It changes shape. Sometimes it softens, sometimes it just gets quieter, but it never owns you forever. It only stays if you let it." Emma listened quietly. She had heard a lot of words from a lot of people over the years. Most of them felt like they were just trying to cover the pain. But when Cole spoke, it felt different. He didn't try to fix things. He spoke like someone who understood what it meant to carry something heavy for a long time. "I used to think pain meant I was weak," she admitted. "But last night, when I said it hurt too much and you—" She paused, her voice softening. "When you told me it meant I was still here, it made me see it differently." Cole nodded slowly. "Pain means you still care. It means something mattered. It means you haven't given up." Emma looked out at the fields. The grass moved gently under the breeze, almost like the land itself was alive. She felt the words sink deep into her chest. She had spent so long running away from pain, thinking it was something she had to get rid of. But maybe it wasn't the enemy. Maybe it was a sign she was still standing. "I'm tired of carrying it alone," she whispered. Cole turned his head slightly. "You don't have to," he said. She met his eyes then. They were steady, calm, the same way they had always been. He wasn't promising to take her pain away. He was simply promising to stay. The wind shifted, carrying the sound of distant cattle. The day stretched open wide before them. Emma took a deep breath. It felt strange and new to breathe without that heavy weight pressing down. It wasn't gone completely, but it was lighter. Later that afternoon, they rode out to check the far pasture. Cole saddled the horses while Emma brushed her mare's coat. The touch of the animal's warm body under her hands grounded her in the present moment. When they set off, the sun was bright, and the wind carried the smell of dry grass and warm earth. Emma hadn't ridden in years. At first her movements were stiff, but Cole stayed beside her, matching her pace. "Easy," he said softly. "You still remember. Just let it come back." And slowly it did. The rhythm of the horse's steps, the way the wind touched her face, the endless sky stretching above. It all came back like it had never really left. She let out a long breath she hadn't even realized she was holding. For the first time in a long time, she felt free. They rode to the far end of the land where the fence met a line of tall trees. Cole stopped his horse and looked over the field. Emma followed his gaze. The grass swayed softly and a hawk circled high in the sky. "This is why I stayed," Cole said. Emma looked at him. "Why?" He didn't smile. He just stared out at the land with quiet eyes. "Because no matter what happens, this place reminds me who I am. When everything hurts, I come here. It doesn't judge me. It just lets me breathe." She followed his gaze again, understanding more than she could say. The land was quiet, but it was not empty. It held something steady, something that didn't vanish when the world turned hard. They sat there on their horses for a long time, not speaking. Emma could feel her heart slowing down, matching the calm around her. It was strange how something so simple could make her feel alive again. On the ride back, she felt lighter. The pain was still there, but now it had a place to rest. It didn't have to control her anymore. That evening, after they finished their work, Cole and Emma sat on the porch again. The sun was low, and the sky was a mix of soft orange and pink. She rested her elbows on her knees, watching the light stretch across the fields. "You ever think about leaving this place?" she asked softly. Cole shook his head slowly. "I used to, but every time I thought about it, something here held me back. Not because I was afraid. Because this is where I learned to stand up again. Everybody needs a place like that. Even if it's not land, even if it's just a person or a moment. You need something that reminds you you're still here." Emma let the words settle in her heart. She had left once, thinking the world out there would give her everything she wanted. But maybe what she had always needed wasn't something far away. Maybe it was something that had been waiting right here all along. She glanced at Cole. The fading light caught his face, warm and steady. He had been part of this land for as long as she could remember, and now sitting here beside him, she understood why people like him never needed to run. They had already found their anchor. Her chest rose and fell with a slow, deep breath. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, tomorrow didn't scare her. She looked out over the land and whispered almost to herself, "I think I want to stay for a while." Cole didn't say much. He just nodded, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. That quiet smile of his said more than words could. The stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky. The wind carried the scent of hay and warm earth. Emma leaned back against the porch railing, letting the night settle around her. The pain wasn't gone, but it had changed. It no longer felt like something pressing down on her chest. It felt like a part of her story, a part that no longer controlled her. She glanced at Cole again, and for the first time she didn't see the past between them. She saw the possibility of a future. It wasn't loud or bright. It was quiet and steady, like the land itself. The night deepened, wrapping the ranch in calm. Emma felt something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Not the big, loud kind that fades fast, but the quiet kind that stays, like the steady beat of a heart that refuses to give up. The soft morning light spread slowly across the land, touching the tops of the fences, the barn roof, and the fields with a golden glow. The air was cool, carrying the smell of earth, hay, and wildflowers that grew along the fence line. Emma stood barefoot on the porch, wrapped in an old flannel shirt. Her hair fell loosely around her shoulders, moving gently with the breeze. She closed her eyes for a moment and breathed in deeply, letting the quiet of the ranch settle into her chest like something she had been missing for a long time. The world out here didn't shout. It didn't rush. It moved at its own steady rhythm, and now slowly, so did she. She stepped down from the porch and walked toward the barn. The sound of her footsteps on the grass mixed with the distant call of a bird. Cole was already there, as he always was before the day truly began. He stood by the fence with his hat pulled low, feeding the horses. The way he moved was the same every morning, calm, steady, and sure. When he saw her walking toward him, he didn't say anything at first. He just gave her that quiet look of his, a small nod, like he always did. She smiled softly. Something about that small gesture had started to feel like home. "Morning," she said. "Morning," he replied. "You're up early." "I didn't want to miss this," she said, looking out at the sunlight spilling across the fields. "It's too good." Cole leaned against the fence, his hands resting on the wood. "Yeah," he said. "It's a good kind of quiet." Emma stood beside him, watching the horses move through the pasture. A soft wind brushed her face, and she felt warm inside, even though the air was still cool. It was a simple moment, but it felt real. She had spent months running from pain, hiding behind city noise, but here she didn't need to hide anymore. Here she could just be. Cole turned toward her slowly. "You look different," he said. Emma raised a brow. "Different how?" "Lighter," he said simply. "Like some of the weight isn't sitting on your shoulders anymore." She looked down at her hands, then back at the land. "Maybe it isn't," she said softly. "It's still there, but it doesn't own me now." Cole didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He just nodded slowly, like he understood every word she didn't have to explain. They spent the rest of the morning doing chores together. She helped him stack bales of hay, brushed the horses, and carried water buckets to the trough. They didn't talk much, but they didn't need to. The silence between them had grown soft, no longer heavy with old memories or pain. It was the kind of silence that made everything feel solid, like the ground beneath their feet. As they worked, Emma found herself humming a tune she hadn't thought about in years. It slipped out of her without warning, light and easy. Cole glanced at her with a small smile but didn't interrupt. He let her be. When the chores were done, they sat on the fence side by side, their boots hanging over the edge. The sun was higher now, warming their backs. The field stretched wide in front of them, endless and calm. "This place," Emma said softly. "It used to scare me a little." Cole turned his head. "Why? Because it was quiet," she said. "And when it's quiet, you can hear everything inside you. I didn't want to hear it before. It hurt too much. But now," she let out a slow breath, "now the quiet doesn't scare me anymore. It feels safe." Cole rested his hands on the fence. "That's when you know you've started to heal," he said. "When silence isn't your enemy anymore." Emma looked at him, and something in her chest warmed. She thought about the woman she had been when she came back here, tired, cracked, and ready to disappear into the noise again. She wasn't that woman anymore. She was still healing, still learning how to breathe without holding her pain like a shield. But she was standing stronger now. They spent the afternoon riding out again, but this time it felt different. Emma wasn't just remembering how to ride. She was enjoying it. She leaned into the wind as the horse moved beneath her, feeling the steady rhythm in her bones. Cole rode beside her, not leading, not pulling ahead, just there, steady like the land. They stopped at the far pasture again, near the same tall trees where they had sat before. The wind moved gently through the grass. Emma dismounted and walked a few steps away, looking at the wide sky. She spread her arms a little, letting the sun hit her face. The light touched her skin, warm and real. "This is what it feels like to breathe again," she whispered to herself. Cole tied his horse to the fence and walked toward her. "You've come a long way since the night you sat on that porch," he said. She turned to him. "Yeah," she answered softly. "That night I thought I was breaking. I didn't realize I was just starting to let the pieces out." Cole nodded. "You don't have to be all right every day. You just have to keep showing up. That's what matters." Emma looked at him closely. His face was quiet and strong the way it always had been. He wasn't the kind of man who promised to fix anything, but he was the kind who stayed. And in the end, that had been enough. They stood there in silence for a long moment, just breathing in the same air. Then she stepped a little closer, close enough to see the lines at the corners of his eyes. Lines that spoke of years of work, of quiet mornings, of never giving up. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For not walking away when I couldn't hold myself together," she said. Cole looked at her for a moment, then said simply, "I wasn't here to fix you, Emma. I was just here." And somehow that meant everything. They walked back to the horses together and rode slowly toward the ranch. The sun lowered in the sky, turning the fields gold again. When they returned, Cole put away the saddles while Emma leaned against the fence, watching the sky turn orange and pink. The same kind of sky she had watched as a child. She realized then that she wasn't just standing on the ranch. She was standing in a part of herself she thought she had lost forever. The land hadn't changed. Cole hadn't changed. She had. As the last light of the sun touched the fields, Cole joined her at the fence. The horses moved quietly in the pasture. A soft wind brushed her face. "I don't know what tomorrow will bring," Emma said. "Nobody does," Cole replied, "but you'll be ready for it." She smiled faintly, her heart steady and calm. For the first time in a very long time, Emma felt safe. Not because everything was perfect. Not because her pain was gone, but because she had learned how to stand in it without letting it swallow her. She had learned to let the quiet hold her, not break her. The night settled slowly over the ranch. The stars began to show one by one, just like they always had. Cole stood beside her, the same steady presence he had been since the day she returned. She didn't know where life would take her next, but she knew she didn't want to run anymore. She turned her eyes toward the dark fields and whispered softly, "I'm still here." Cole looked at her and nodded once. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You are." The wind carried their quiet words into the night. The pain that once felt like a heavy chain had become something different, something that no longer ruled her. It had become a part of her story, not the whole of it. And as the crickets sang in the grass and the stars filled the sky, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not fear, not emptiness, but hope, gentle, quiet, and strong. It wasn't loud. It didn't have to be. It was enough.